Hello and welcome to Indie Designer Journal episode 7. Today we're going to be looking at choose your own adventure games. Well, specifically we're going to be looking at this big bad boy here, the Legacy of Dragonholt. I always want to say Legend of Dragonholt for some reason, but Legacy of Dragonholt. The Game Crafter, if some of you aren't aware, runs lots of contests, and the contest that's currently up right now they call the Choose Your Own Path Challenge, probably because Choose Your Own Adventure might be trademarked or something, but what they're looking for is a game that has a Choose Your Own Adventure style mechanics. So I have a whole bunch of Choose Your Own Adventure games. I grew up on them myself. I'm sure many of you watching this have at least played some of the basic Choose Your Own Adventure games. There was that series, I believe, called Lone Wolf. There was Fighting Fantasy. I have a few newer ones here. Actually, I have one that's fairly old. I have Fabled Lands. I'm sort of been working my way through this one more recently. I backed this one here called Myrk, I believe is how you pronounce that. Myrrk. So I might show a little bit of this today because there's some very interesting things. It's very illustrative. There's a lot of illustrations in this one. It's kind of a different kind of setup or different mechanics there. Then I have this one here called the Curse of the Salt Ash Mine. This is actually done by a friend of mine, Paul Stapleton. He designed this game here, Pauper's Ladder, which is actually a very fantastic game. You should check that out. Maybe we'll take a look at that in a future episode as well. Beautiful illustration. Does all his own art himself and designs, so it feels like sort of like myself. So I like to support his work as well. So yeah, so we're going to be looking at Legacy of Dragonholt because this contest, the Choose Your Own Path Challenge, ends in August 22nd to be exact. I believe that makes 66 days you have left to come up with something. So I don't know who all is working on a game. I am personally not, but I thought that I would do an episode focusing on this Legacy of Dragonholt because there's some really cool mechanics in here that I find very interesting as a designer that I would like to personally incorporate in some of my card games or board games, not necessarily a Choose Your Own Adventure, but there's some very cool mechanics, specifically in regards to dealing with time and having different events occur at different times of the day, and it's really handled very well in this game. And then we'll look at a couple of these other ones quickly, and maybe we'll go more of a deep dive in future episodes on each one of these other ones. Also, at the back end of this video, I'm going to do a little discussion about crowd sales because I've seen a few posts on different Facebook groups in regards to crowd sales, and there's some negative stuff out there. People just kind of throwing their opinions out there, and as you know, all I do is run crowd sales. I no longer use Kickstarter, so it's been working for me. We'll get into that on the back side of this video, but that's all I have, and let's turn this camera around to the table. We'll take a look at Legacy of Dragonholt. Okay, welcome back to the table. We're going to be taking a look at Legacy of Dragonholt. Now, if you don't own this game and you are a fan of fantasy, Choose Your Own Adventure, and solo games, then you're missing out, because pound for pound, this is one of the better buys I think out there for a really good you can play up to 6 players with it. I'm playing this with my daughter right now, so it works very well as a cooperative experience, especially my daughter likes to read, so we do a lot of the reading back and forth, and she likes to do all the note keeping. So we have this little book that we use that she keeps track of all of the entry points that we have read as we're going, and she keeps track of certain story points that we check off. So those are a couple of things I wanted to talk about that make this game kind of unique experience. Well, first of all, there is a lot of content in here. There is a bunch of books. The main book is the Village of Dragonholt, where you sort of adventure out from. But to begin the game, where's the one you start in? That is character creation. Two New Roads is where you start. So the game starts you off in a little tiny, not really a mission. You're kind of just trying to get to the town of Dragonholt, and this is sort of your experience and adventure to get there. So that's sort of like your first play of the game. I think this took us 2 sessions to get through. I'm not exactly sure how many minutes total it took, but it was a good amount of content in just this little adventure here. And maybe we'll look a little bit at this. I don't want to do any spoilers here, but if you buy the game, you're going to see all this anyways. You have this really big, thick book here, which is like I said, the Village of Dragonholt. And then you have all these little adventures that you're going to go on from this point. And a nice little cool thing is when you're actually in the town of Dragonholt, I'll put this stuff over here out of the way. You actually have this map that you get to utilize. And when you want to go to a certain place, like the Drunken Hog, that tells you what number in the book you have to read out of the big book for that city. And based on things that you might have done already, you're going to get more options, just like a traditional choose your own adventure game. So what's interesting about this game is how it deals with a few different things. You have on the back of the rule book, it gives you this. You could make Xerox copies of this. We just write it in a separate book altogether. But you have these little story points, A1, A2, blah, blah, blah. And as you do different things or make different choices, the books will tell you, check off I4. So you check off I4. Then later on, something else will occur and it'll ask you to potentially, it'll ask you, one of the options will be for how to deal with a certain situation in the future is if you have checked off I4, you can do this or you can read this. So it's a really good way. A lot of games do that. Like even, I got it right here, Fabled Lands does the same thing where you'll read something, and if you make a certain decision, it'll tell you to check off a certain word, and they use words here, code words, and you just check one of those off, and then later on, if that particular code word's been checked off, you'll be given more options. So that's a good way of keeping track of what the player has done. And if you're just deciding to go into this contest for the Game Crafter, obviously you got 2 months, roughly 2 months. You got a little over 2 months. You're not going to be able to make something as elaborate as this, but maybe you can take some of the things that make this work really well and reduce them down into something smaller. Now, if that's what I would do if I were trying to tackle this game. I think one of the only really main requirement for the contest is that you have to use one of their perfect bound books or coil bound books, and so you're going to have to be doing some writing. So that's the part that I think is why I think the challenge should have been a little bit longer, because you're essentially asking someone to write a small book, in a few months. So that's a pretty difficult task. But I think if you break it down into something more streamlined, like Fabled Lands, I think you could possibly pull it off. And I think if you added enough little interesting things to make the game kind of shine, like we're going to go over a couple of more things in here that I really enjoy, I think that could really give you an edge in the game, in the contest. So like I said, you have a bunch of story points. Almost every game I've seen thus far that is a choose your own adventure uses something like that. So that's nothing new, but they do handle time in an interesting way, whereas certain you might have an encounter and you make a decision. Like for an example, early in the quest, you're walking down a path, and the path has a bunch of brush and trees and stuff blocking the path. Now you have like 3 options. One of them is to clear the path and keep going, or one of them to take a side route, and I think there's a third option. So in any case, if you decide to clear the path out, I think that's what we did. 2 time passes. So there's basically a currency in the game is time. So I forgot how many. We haven't played in a few weeks, but I think there's like 7 or 10 or whatever it is moments of time throughout the day. You click them off, and then when you read another entry, it might ask you if it's this time of day, if this much time has passed, you need to read this entry, or if less than this much time has passed, read this entry. So certain things will happen at different times of day. Like when you get to the town, if you go to the inn, sometimes it's closed, sometimes it's open. So you have to make decisions, and time is a factor. So the fact that they were able to add time to a game like this, I think is amazing, the way they deal with it in here. And like I said, I urge you to pick this up if you can. Sometimes it's on sale on Amazon for under $40, and I think it's a real steal at that price. Another thing that they do that's pretty cool is you can acquire items in the game, special items, and I think I got 2 of them here. A little spoiler here, nothing crazy, but I got a healing potion, so it tells you to take card number A or card number B, and the rest of them are all in here, and I have not looked at them. I don't want to know what's in there. And I think that's kind of a cool thing too that you could do using the Game Crafter. Even though the cards come from the Game Crafter shuffled, you could still have numbers on them or letters on them, and you could have certain items or events that occur that you would pull this, and maybe there's like a secret note or something on here that someone gives you, and then the game would tell you to pull this out. And then just adding that textile thing to this game, because it's mostly this is reading. You're reading and you're making decisions. Let's not fool ourselves here. But adding a little textile element where now the player has this healing potion, an actual card, a physical sort of object, I think it adds something to the game. And as a designer, I think it's a brilliant thing that they did that. And the next thing here is a little wooden trinket that we found in the woods. It's in the beginning, so I'm not too much of a spoiler, but I haven't found necessarily yet, I don't think, what I do with this. So there's obviously this belongs to somebody, and I'm hoping that I can figure out who. So I think that's fun, and I think adding cards is fantastic. So that is Legacy of Dragonholt. I'm not going to go through and read anything and how it plays. There is a good little rule book. There's not much to this game. You're basically reading, making decisions. You do have these little tokens that basically balance out the decision making, so not one person's making all the decisions. So when you make a decision, you flip it over and it's black and white, and then after everyone's made a choice, and they all flip back over. I think that's a good way of keeping everyone engaged in the game. We don't necessarily use it, me and my daughter. We just sort of kind of talk it out what we want to do. So the rule book for a game that's this large in scale, I mean, it's going to take you hours and hours and hours to play. I mean, the rules are very, very simple. There's nothing to it. It's 4 or 5 pages, and then you have your character. There's more into character creation, and even there's not much to it. You choose a type of person, and then you have these skills, which is another little interesting bit. You have these skills, like if you're a knight, you might have military, athletics, awareness, dueling, devotion, or willpower. You choose a certain number of skills. You can pay extra stamina, which is your health essentially, to gain more additional skills. But those skills come up when you're reading the story. So like if you have you're walking down a trail, and one of the options that your choices will be limited. If maybe one of them will say, if you have awareness, you can read this entry, but if you don't have any skills that pertains to this certain instance, you're going to have to read like a default sort of thing. So having these skills will help you obviously in certain situations when you're reading. So we found that we tried to make obviously 2 very different type of characters so that we could be somewhat balanced, but we're only playing with 2 players. We still have weaknesses as a little group. So, but yes, that's basically it. You choose a class. Each class allows you to take different skills. Those skills are used in the storybook, but something like that could be utilized on a smaller scale. If you were to make just a smaller, more compact little game, I think you could utilize some of these things. Maybe you have a map. that has points that you can go around and read certain entries every time you go there. You can have different villages or different dungeons or locations, or it could be space themed. It could be different planets. It could be so much you could have with a little game board or a map. And then you could incorporate, like I said, having some cards so characters are holding something. Then you can use the day and night, so some way to handle time. There's a lot to be learned from this game, and I'm obviously just kind of going over the things that are interesting to me as a designer. But if you're more interested in it, there's obviously plenty of videos on YouTube that there's playthrough videos and everything. But I think this is a game that if you're interested in that contest, you should really look at this game. Thank you. Welcome back, and thanks for sticking around. I'd like to take just a few moments to talk about crowd sales. Crowd sales, if you don't know what a crowd sale is, I'll give you just a brief description. It's essentially a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter or Game Fund or any other one like that, except it's ran through the game crafter, so they will handle all of the manufacturing. Obviously, they're a print-on-demand service, so they'll handle all of that for you. Plus, they do all the fulfillment for you. Now, for me as a designer, where I'm at personally with Grey Gnome Games, it's a perfect match for me. I say that because crowd sales, if you look at some of them, there's a lot of them that are doing really well right now. I think it's starting to pick up some momentum. I don't think it's for everybody. I think it's worth trying at least, but I really don't think it's for everyone. But I think to make the blanket statement that crowd sales are the worst, or that you should stick with Kickstarters, I think that's false. It's been working for me, and I'll explain to you how it's working for me. I used to do Kickstarters. I ran 12 of them. All of them were successful. I made quite a bit of money as far as funding is concerned. But after anyone who's ran a Kickstarter, who's listening to this or watching this right now, will contest that there is so much time put into everything, just from the months leading up to the Kickstarter, all the marketing and time you spent getting the word out about your game. That's time that you're spending. During the campaign, you're pretty much married to your computer. I have a daytime job, so I would be spending all my nights trying to keep up with emails and answering questions during the campaign, and even right after the campaign and leading up to the campaign. Then you're trying to get quotes prior. You're working on getting quotes. I had most of my games manufactured in China for my Kickstarters, and you have to deal with manufacturers that there's language barriers. There's all kinds of things that are not necessarily easy to deal with. Yes, there's middlemen that you can hire. You can hire companies that will do a lot of that legwork for you. There's manufacturers that sort of have integrated middlemen built in, sort of like Panda Game Maker, Panda GM. I use them for one of my games, Train Maker, where they sort of have a corporate office, I believe, stationed in Florida, and they sort of handle everything and make it a little bit easier process. But still, it's time that you're spending dealing with manufacturers. There's sending files, all that back and forth. Then there's the waiting for shipping. Then there's import costs. There's obviously the manufacturing costs. There's the 10% you lose to Kickstarter. Then you get the games. What are you going to do with those? Well, you can pay. There's fulfillment services out there. There's plenty of them. You run a Kickstarter, you're going to get an email a day at least. At least I was back then. Maybe it's 10 emails a day now from people that will do fulfillment services for you. You'll also get tons and tons and tons of emails from marketing companies that are going to help you sell your game on Kickstarter. Some of them are good, some of them aren't, some of them are jokes. Weeding through all of that to find out what's the best route to go there. And then you're paying for advertisements, which you're going to have to do with a crowd sale as well, paying for Facebook ads or what have you. But it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time. Then the games arrive. In my case, I didn't pay for a fulfillment service. I literally bought my boxes from Uline, had those shipped to my house. Then I built all the boxes for shipping. I bought all the packing material. I bought a subscription for an online way to make my labels to ship everything. So I spent, if I told you the number, it's almost $100,000 I spent in shipping over those 12 Kickstarters, and I literally boxed every single one of them. And well, I had help from some friends in my family, but it's a ton of work, ton of time was pretty much buried into that. So my point being, if I don't know if you heard me say the word time, but there was a lot of time spent in the whole process of running a Kickstarter. And for myself, that's not what I enjoy. Maybe there's people out there who love the whole publishing end. Now, I consider myself a publisher, but I do self-publishing through the Game Crafter now. So now I use crowd sales. And there's some good reasons for that. The main one being my time. So now I can focus all of my time on illustrating and designing. Those are where my passion and where my heart are. So if you're like me and you want to be focused on that, then crowd sales give you that advantage. Also, let's talk about money. Now, a lot of designers, publishers, whatever you want to call people like me are, zip their mouths when it comes to profits. I literally have an article that I will link in my description of this video that go over all the numbers in detail. I'm not going to go over all the numbers in detail right now, but I will tell you this, that my best performing Kickstarters, the ones that gained the most money, I had, I think Dig Down Dwarf was like just broke 50,000, and Zogar's Gaze was 42. Most of my games were in the 20 to 30,000 range, which was pretty successful back when I was running them from like 2012 to 2017. Those were pretty good numbers. Now games are, that's below average. Now games are like 100,000 to $1 million is considered successful. So in any case, my point being is after expenses, after manufacturing, after fulfillment, shipping is a crazy amount of money. After all of that was said and done, on a $50,000 game, $50,000 of funding, after paying 10% to Kickstarter and all of that, I might have made $15,000, $15,000. Okay, you're like, well, that's $15,000. Great. Well, then when you start to actually think about the time that I put into it, I was essentially paying myself way below minimum wage. So yes, it's a passion. Yes, to think you're going to get into game design and publishing and become a millionaire is a pipe dream. But let's be realistic. We have to put some kind of price on our time, and that's where I think a lot of people get glossy-eyed or rose-colored glasses with Kickstarter. I mean, they're going to make millions of dollars, but a lot of that money is going to be gone. So with crowd sales, my last crowd sale, for Iron Chest, the one prior to Banners, I had total funding was $42,000. So I believe it was 42 or 43,000. Plus there was a ton of extra sales of my game. People added a bunch of stuff onto their cart. I made way more than $15,000. I think I'm 17, 18, and I'll probably have another 2,000 coming in extra sales, so probably around $20,000. So almost half of the money that was raised is going to be profit for me, which is not what happened with Kickstarters, all the Kickstarters I ran. Plus, I don't have extra inventory. Literally in the basement of my other house, I have stacks and stacks of cases of games that were leftovers that I attempted to sell. I couldn't sell them all. So with crowd sales, however many sell during the crowd sale, that's how many the Game Crafters manufacture, and that's how many get shipped out. So I don't have to ship. I don't have to worry about having extra overhead. So there's all that's eliminated. So that's my case for crowd sales. Like I said, I'll link the article below. I go a little bit more into detail in the numbers, but it works for some people. I mean, if you can build an audience for a Kickstarter, you can build an audience for a crowd sale. And I think I'm hoping I get more and more people to run crowd sales and make money and start building that, because the more good games that are on crowd sales, the more people that are going to come to the site, and it's only going to help everyone else out. So that's my little rant about crowd sales. I thank you very much for sticking around for this video, for watching this little back half of the video, and I'll see you next time.